Let me just start off by saying that clearly McFarlane and I are absolute besties. We've drank from the same beer bottle. We have matching tattoos. And once on a business trip, I forgot my toothbrush and we shared a toothbrush. He has even allowed me to wear his giant gold wrapper chain once in a while. That is just how we roll. But all jokes aside, clearly, McFarlane and I, first of all, he probably doesn't even know that I exist. But secondly, even if he did, he would absolutely hate my channel. Not because I don't enjoy McFarlane action figures, but just because more often than not, it feels like I'm criticizing him, or I just come out and bash some of his poor action figures. Now, I will say, recently, it's been kind of a mixed bag. I think this particular video, or this little wave that he released, is very similar to what Hasbro has been doing. Like the Marvel Legends reveals at the PulseCon event were mixed, to say the least. Some of the figures looked absolutely brilliant and others looked like absolute hot garbage. Very similar to the Black Series line. Not everything that they announced was great. Same thing with the Star Wars vintage line. It just feels like it's a little bit of everything. I think that's just the era of collectibles as a whole. It's very difficult for an OM to consistently give us absolute fire, unless you're Jada Toys, of course. But in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the newer releases from McFarlane. As I mentioned in some of my previous videos, I'm falling very behind on some of the newer releases or some of the newer announcements. And today we're going to go through some of the best stuff that has been released, or just in general, some of the stuff that's been released. Maybe not the best, but for sure, I believe it's like the 4 newest figures that went up for pre-order. The first one that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to try to save as much breath and saliva on this figure because it's ridiculous. This is the Nightmare Edition Batman from the DC vs. Vampire storyline. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a McFarlane Toy Store exclusive. So if you guys are interested in it, it's available now for $39.99. And let me just get it out of the way. It's hideous. It's ugly. It looks like it's all just black plastic, and then they painted some gold features here or there. Or even better, it's probably just black and gold plastic. I'm not 100% sure, but it's irrelevant. By the way, for those people that are saying that these figures tend to sell out, I have a theory. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's either hardcore collectors that collect anything that McFarlane throws out there, but I think most of them are just people that, or I should say scalpers, that are looking to pick these up, wait for them to gain value, and then try to resell them down the line, because most of these are very limited. I've seen them as low as like 1,500 to like 7,000. I think it depends on the retailer, or it depends on the shipping process, or how much they want to manufacture it, or how much they feel like they're going to sell. But for the most part, I've seen them around like that 3,000 to 5,000 unit range, which means they're going to be limited. There's not as many of these being manufactured, and eventually down the line, these scalpers, or these people that are looking to flip this figure, are looking to see if potentially these figures go up in value. And I think that's what we see a lot of the times with these figures selling out. But at this particular situation, it's been, well, as of the moment of this recording, almost an entire week, and they're not sold out. So they're still available if you guys are interested in picking these up, if you're into ugly, hideous things. But all jokes aside, just keep in mind you're going to be paying $40 up front, and I believe with shipping and taxes, you're paying closer to like $47, I want to say. I don't know exactly how much shipping is from the McFarlane Toy Store, but it's not free. So you'll definitely be paying closer to about $50 for an ugly repainted figure with really nothing new. And that beautiful card stand, I mean, come on. You gotta love that card stand. McFarlane is a genius for including that. Speaking of absolutely frustrating action figure releases, McFarlane also decided to re-release the Batman Noel action figure. Not in the Page Punchers line, because this does not include an actual comic book. So it's essentially a re-release without the comic book. If I'm not mistaken, that is a new head sculpt, or at least a re-engineered one from a different Batman, and then a cloth cape. There's definitely an alternate color palette here, so it's a matter of personal perspective, what you're really into. Do you prefer the plastic capes, or do you prefer a cloth cape with a slightly different head sculpt and a different paint job? That's essentially the difference here. And I will say, even though it is a little bit frustrating and it is essentially another re-release from McFarlane, there's at least a minor upgrade here. Whereas in, for example, the Batman that we just talked about, that's a McFarlane toy exclusive, that one's absolute garbage. I mean, it's essentially just a repaint with nothing really added to it in a really weird color palette. At least this one, they upgraded, or at least I don't know if upgrade is the correct terminology, but it's a different look if the first one really didn't do it for you. Not to mention the cloth cape, which is always, I think, an upgrade over almost all of the plastic capes. I guess it depends, especially if it's like a longer draped cape. At least in my personal opinion, it really does hinder the action figure, especially if you want to get it into some crazy poses. If it's a smaller tiny cape, then I guess you can work around it. But when it's a longer draped one, I would much rather prefer a cloth cape, and that's exactly what you're getting here. So it is a little bit frustrating. It's a figure that we've already received in the past. And I love the design, by the way, on the suit and the figure all around. This is one of like the top, I think, 5 best looks for Batman, at least from McFarlane up to this point. So it's definitely a figure that maybe deserved a re-release with some minor little upgrades, but at least it's adding value to your display, unlike some of the other releases that McFarlane has done in the last couple of years. This one's frustrating, but at least it has a place in the line for sure. Moving on to a must-have in my personal opinion, and probably the figure that I'm the most excited about when it comes down to this little reveal from McFarlane, has to be that Silver Age Batman with Ace. And yes, I should mention up front, Ace is not articulated at all, but I'm okay with it. This is a $22.99 price point with an extra really cool accessory. He comes with 6 hands total, a wired cape, and a batarang. In my personal opinion, that's absolute value. Not to mention, McFarlane just recently announced his Silver Age Joker, so these would look absolutely phenomenal next to each other. And for those few people out there that are still complaining about too many Batman in the line, I will say at least he's giving us iconic Batmans. In the last few years, we just recently received the Golden Age first appearance Batman. Now we have the Silver Age one. We've received the Christian Bale version, the Michael Keaton iteration, a couple of Ben Affleck's, the Dark Knight Returns, and I could go on and on. Yes, they are a bunch of Batmans that we're receiving from McFarlane, but at least they're iconic. They'll stand out in your display, and they're from very specific source materials that are beloved by the community, not just people that read comic books, but also people that enjoy movies and animated shows, live action shows, you name it. I really like it. I know that he's really heavy on the Batman, but they're based in some of the most beloved source material of all time. Also up for pre-order is that Neo Gothic Batman Beyond action figure. And honestly, I'm not too familiar with the source material. If I'm not mistaken, this takes place right after like the bulk of the animated series and then some of the comic book series that were going on around that time. I am familiar obviously with the animated show as well as some of the comic book runs featuring Batman Beyond, but this one I think is a little bit past that time. By then I think like Bruce Wayne is dead and a couple of other crazy things happen. So for the most part, only hardcore comic book readers will be familiar with this suit, at least from what I can remember. As I said, I like the suit. I like the wings. They're detachable. It comes with 2 extra hands, and there is actually a batarang molded into one of the hands, which is pretty cool if that's your style. Personally, I like the removable batarang. I know it looks a little bit weird and goofy sometimes with the way that the batarang actually fits inside of the hand, but the molded batarang in there definitely helps, I think, with posability. You're not gonna have to like deal with the batarang falling in and out of the hand. I like the figure, and when I first saw it, I thought, well, it's a reuse of the original Batman Beyond action figure, but I don't think so. I think like the legs maybe, and maybe the head sculpt is brand new, but I think the legs for sure are from a different Batman. So it's really cool to get kind of like a mix and match of different limbs and different body pieces to make this figure. Not my personal favorite. Like I said, I prefer a classic Batman Beyond, but for people that followed the comic book series all the way through, this is a really nice touch from McFarlane himself. And then lastly, McFarlane decided to throw up a pre-order for the 13th Hour Batman with the Backlighter, which is an Amazon exclusive. And if you guys are wondering, it actually sold out. I was very, very surprised by this figure selling out. Not to say that the figure doesn't look phenomenal. It comes with an action figure stand, the backlighter, a batarang, as well as a grapple gun. Not to mention it comes with a really cool cardboard cutout backdrop, which is supposed to be like Gotham City, I'm assuming. And I could definitely be wrong about this, but if I remember correctly, this action figure is based on the whole Court of Owls storyline, which is really cool because we have been getting a bunch of Court of Owls figures. We just recently got, for example, a 3-pack that featured Talon. So McFarlane has been slowly and quietly and methodically building out that entire storyline in action figure form. And I know I'm usually pretty quick to criticize McFarlane for a lot of different things, but this is one of those instances where McFarlane just demonstrates why he is one of the top OMs. Even though he does slip up and make mistakes, this particular release definitely brought a smile to my face. Overall, as I said, it's kind of like a hit or miss all around for me. I feel like there are a couple of figures here that I could definitely get behind. The other two, not so much. And this is really what collecting has become. As I said at the beginning of the video, Hasbro's fallen into that same trend where they release absolute bangers next to some very subpar action figures. But let me know your thoughts down below. This is just my personal opinion, my personal thoughts. I am always very curious to see what the community has to say about all of these releases. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to stay tuned. We do upload pretty consistently. It's funny because sometimes it feels like I'm uploading 7 to 8 times a week, and then I check my weekly recap on the studio app and it says I've only uploaded like 2 to 3. So it definitely feels like we've been ramping up, but maybe it doesn't feel like it, I guess. But like I said, we do upload at least 3 to 4 times on a weekly basis where we just ramble on about action figures. So if that's your cup of tea, definitely make sure to stay tuned. And as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part about all of this. If you're not enjoying it, you're not doing it right. Stay safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.